Yeah, it's working. All right. Thank you. All right, so I think we have to try to save time and cut short all formalities. We have three speakers online, and so we are going, maybe can we have them on? We're supposed to have Professor Ramesh Loganathan.
I'm here.
Good, good. Thank you very much. Mr. Roland Eckwartner.
Yes, I'm here too. Hello.
Okay, thank you very much. Sorry for having kept you waiting. And we have Mr. Christophe Collinet. No? All right, maybe he's going to join us later. Okay, so we are going to start. I will really cut short everything to give more time to colleagues around and speakers. So we are here to discuss about connectivity in smart cities and looking at digitization, energy and transport in particular. So I will, before I give the floor to Professor Ramesh Loganathan, I will ask Mr. Sushil Kumar if he's here. No? Yeah, he's here. Right, if you could please come and join us. Yeah. So Mr. Sushil Kumar, Additional Director General Telecom DOT. Mr. Jagan Shah, Resident Senior Fellow ARTA International. Thank you. And Mr. Kishore Narang, Narnix Technology. I think. Yeah, thank you. So I'm going to thank you very much for joining us. So we're starting now. No, I'll be sitting there, so you can I'm just introducing people, or yeah, maybe you're right actually. You can. Yeah. Sorry, just little logistics and we're back. So let us start. So we are going to give the floor to Professor Ramesh Loganathan, Professor Co-Innovation and Head Research Outreach, IIT Hyderabad. Professor Ramesh, after 25 years in the product and R&D space, moved to IIT Hyderabad as faculty in 2016. As Professor Co-Innovation, heading the Research Innovation Outreach at IIT Hyderabad. He's helped start and grow the Technology Transfer Office, Co-Innovation Labs, and the Center for Innovation and Entrepreneurship. Association with IITH started in 2002, 21 years ago, as adjunct faculty. Also was visiting faculty at IIT Hyderabad Innovation, and a member of governing board of incubators at IIT Hyderabad, and Delhi, and BITS. Prior to academics, he worked in the tech industry, Bay Area, and since 2000 in Hyderabad as product R&D leader. Most recently was the India head of Progress Software. Prior to Progress, he was VP of middleware technologies at Pramati and also headed product engineering. Professor, if you would like to start, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Very happy to be part of this conference. And I wish I was there in the room in person, but otherwise happy to be here, at least virtually. I have some slides. I don't have permission to share. If I may get the permission, or I can speak without slides, either way, please.
we're trying to set up the sharing with you.
Yeah, I can get started. Okay, I got it. Um, I don't have a way to share the screen, but there's no share screen option. Okay, I'm just going to speak. It's okay. I don't want to waste everybody's time. So good afternoon. I'm going to be talking about an interesting model, again, incidentally initiated by the Indo-EU Standards Project back in 18, which has led to something fantastic in the years that followed. It started off with the Indo-EU Initiative on ICT Standards, so where the project was specifically to get more organizations part of some of the standards. And we got connected on the 1M2M standard, which is a standard for smart cities, generally broadly IoT standards, but specifically being pushed and adopted in the smart city areas. And we got connected to that, and the Indo-EU project supported knowledge activities. So essentially, we were doing joint workshops and joint seminars and hackathons and such, between some labs in the Europe and us. We did some in Delhi and some here at IIIT Hyderabad in our campus. And it was to get to know the standard, and then also in the process we got to be part of the standards committee, the main committee as well. One of our faculty is part of the main 1M2M standards committee, and we also got connected to the India end of the same standard. Now India, since then, this was 2018. And last year, Government of India has adopted that as a formal BIS standard for smart cities, the 1M2M standard. And one thing led to the other, and we started doing. We said, like, we visited, got a chance to visit the last CNRS lab in Toulouse, and where they had a whole building that was kind of wired for data, and they had last 7 years of data, which was available for research purposes. It could be kind of energy consumption. They had solar panels, solar power generation, and other kinds of data collected continuously and available as a large data set. It was very impressive. And inspired by that, we came back in 19 and said, why not we do a smart campus here? Get our campus also wired. I mean, we are a 65-acre campus with 2,000 students resident that live and work and study on campus. And we have faculty and staff that also are housed on campus. And we have a very large incubator. So we have a lot of people that come during the day, floating population during the day. So it has all kind of elements of a small city. And so we said, why not we kind of wire the campus and start collecting data and make it available for research and innovation. And then we were already working on the 1M2M standard. So we said, why not we base it on that standard? And so we started some work, and we started to put some sensors initially. We set up a small lab, called it the Smart City Research Lab, and started to work on it. And as we were doing it, in parallel, there was a kind of an initiative to set up a smart city living lab. The National Smart Cities Mission and Ministry of IT, Government of India, were both kind of working on, based on an kind of international cooperation agreement signed between the Government of Netherlands and Government of India to replicate a living lab that's there in Amsterdam, the Amsterdam Innovation Arena Living Lab, which is kind of supported by the city of Amsterdam to test out innovations that are applicable to the city. So test it out in the stadium complex, and then before rolling it out widely. And so we were asked if we would be willing to kind of be the living lab in India. And of course, we were very happy. And very quickly, in about 4-5 months, the proposal got approved, signed off. And in early 2020, the project got awarded to us. And 7-8 months, unfortunately, pandemics have got delayed. By end of the year, we had the whole project plan in place. And the living lab got off the ground early 21. And the whole idea is to build a complete, like the vertical that we picked. We had water, we had energy, we had wastewater and waste, we had weather and pollution. and a little bit on kind of city monitoring, roads, transportation, and safety. And we have sensors on campus. We have the whole of energy distribution is set up. We have about 80 distribution nodes. All of it is now digitally wired, and data is available through the 1M2M standard into the central kind of data lake and repository. We have wired the water quality, water distribution. We've got a reasonably large solar power generation on our rooftop, about 70 kilowatt power generation. So we monitor the solar, kind of the irradiance and such, and also the power generation data. We have the wastewater we monitor. We do a little bit of crowd monitoring and pollution. We have very large pollution modeling and monitoring project where the extended area around our campus, we've got 50 sensors, and we model pollution, monitor and model pollution. And so we got pollution modeling as well. And it took us quite some time to get these sensors because in India, even the wireless sensors are not very common. And if you do find them, they're very, very expensive. So we had to get a little creative. In some cases, we took analog sensors and just kind of digitized it and made wireless. In other cases, we got normal wired digital sensors and then digital sensors and then made them wireless. And we got multiple protocols on campus. We got a Wi-Fi network for the sensors. We have LoRa network. And then, of course, we use a little bit of 4G. Some sensors come on the 4G network. And recently, we set up a Wi-Fi network, which is an emerging standard that some companies are pushing for, and works very well for cities, like especially for sensors like water and such, which are generally underground, the sensors, and they don't work very well with either 4G or standards like LoRa. And Wi-Fi works very well. It's a mesh network. There are no towers. Right, every street lamp post on the road can be the hub. So your sensors need to connect only to the closest lamppost. It's an interesting model, hub and spoke model. So we have a whole Silicon Labs has funded that, and we have the whole campus wired for Wi-Fi. So we have 4 different communication standards, and we now just got selected as part of the DOT's 5G use cases lab. So we'll soon have a 5G sensor network as well on campus. So we have the sensors, which are digitized and made wireless. We have the wireless communication. And then on the back end, we have a complete 1M2M kind of server installation. So all data is pushed through the 1M2M standard, which incidentally Europe is adopting in a big way. France and a few other countries are leading the charge, and they're using 1M2M extensively as a standard for smart cities. And so all data comes through 1M2M standard and comes into the, so it took us about a year and a half just to get the standard sensors in place, data models and such. And now we're beginning to do things with it. So we're supposed to, there are research projects underway. Many of our research labs are working on this data and trying to do things around this data. We run startup challenges. So where this data is now available, the whole sensors, the network, and the data is available for startups, either to build their AI models or get their own sensors in and make it available in the standard. And so we run challenges. We've done about 4 startup challenges so far. We also have corporate funding partners. The idea was that, like, if large companies are involved, there's something more meaningful might come out of this lab. Else, it might kind of end up becoming a very academic initiative. So we have Intel, Silicon Labs, and Saint-Gobain already has 3 founding partners. We have a couple of more that we're talking to. So they come with their own challenges and problems and such. Saint-Gobain is working with us on some of the smart glass solutions that they have, and Silicon Labs is working with us on the Wi-Fi. So they have one of the first deployment across the world in our campus. Wi-Fi is a very, very new standard, less than 2 years old. And so they funded the whole setup of the Wi-Fi network on the campus. And so the corporate partners are the other part of it, and the government itself. The Smart City Mission is one of the founding partners, and the state of Telangana, the state we are based in, they are a partner, and the city of Hyderabad also is a partner. And then now in recent months, we're doing other things, like this whole standards-based solution is showing up in different places. Like, for instance, the city of Hyderabad Water Supply Board is now working with us, and they're setting up a water COE on the campus. They want standards-based. Like today, when they get digital sensors, each has its own standards, and like it's very hard for them to unify. So they're looking at Wi-Fi as a communication standard and 1M2M as a data standard. And so that, like, once they set up this pilot, in their RFPs, they can insist that the data coming in has to come through the 1M2M standard, and become much easier for them to kind of interoperate. And so we're working likewise, like I said, the Department of Telecom, Government of India is also looking at for smart city, especially water use cases. The 5G use cases lab we have here is that's being set up here is around water. And So in the one of the founding objectives of Smart Cities mission was to look at this as a mini city, small city, right? And that is now coming to bear. We're talking to Smart Cities mission to see how can we create a ready to deploy package for small cities, like anywhere population of, like say 1 million to I mean 500,000 to a million, or even a couple of million population, small towns, which there are several thousands of them in the country, trying to create a ready-to-use package of sorts, right? Say that these are the sensors. Anybody can supply the sensors, whether it's water monitoring or water purity or water treatment plant, twin or wastewater and such. And so the water can be monitored, and likewise few other parameters, and the data model, the dashboards, and we're just working with them. The first few cities we may deploy soon. So that is the. I just want to present this case study in the talk of this interesting experiment, where we bring all the stakeholders together around this domain of smart cities and around standards and standards-based solution. So I'll pause here, and thank you for the opportunity to present this case study.
Yeah, thank you so much. You've been excellent with time. I mean, I didn't give you the time, but I think each speaker should have about 7 to maximum 8 minutes if we want to have a little interaction. So I will have to interrupt each of you. Have to do this bad job. Sorry for that. Thank you so much again. So now let's give the floor to. So we'll have each presentation and then we open up for question and answer. Mr. Roland H. Wartner, Chairman of the One M2M Technical Plenary. Roland works in the Standards, Patents, and OSPO team in Group Technology of Dutch Telecom, where he's responsible for standardization activities in the service domain. He's also part of the open source program of his team. Roland joined the Department of Systems Engineering of Max Mobile, later T-Mobile Austria, in 1999 as project manager for mobile data solutions, introducing GPRS and related data services into Max Mobile network. Since 2002, he's been working as delegate for Dutch Telecom in several standardization organizations, starting with focus on messaging, 3GPP, OMA, later shifting to device management and LOT. He joined One M2M as delegate in 2012. He was elected for the One M2M Technical Plenary Chairman position in 2018 and re-elected in 2020 and in 2022. Before, he has served as Vice Chairman of the Technical Plenary for 2 terms, 2014 to 2018. Roland, please, the floor is yours for about 7 to max 8 minutes. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for this kind introduction, and thanks also to Professor Ramesh Loganathan. So he, in his use case, he explained also mainly why, how you can use 1M2M in which layers. I will briefly show you the main goal and use case of 1M2M in relationship to smart cities. And with that, yeah, it works. I keep it brief. The why these cities want to be smart. It's the main goal is to raise the quality of life for citizens. The complexity of that undertaking is, if you look at the city, even a small city, there are various devices, sensors installed. You would like to create intelligent transport systems, smart grids, public safety systems, you call it. There are many already installed technologies, and how to get all these data working together to understand each other, all these devices and sensors, how to control, manage that. That's technically an issue, but also psychologically for some of the people. So the acceptance to provide such services requires usually also some legal framework to build trust in such solutions. It needs to be economically feasible. It needs scalability. This is usually based on interoperable services and not only on technical standards, but also the data layer to understand the data of all these players. It needs to be secure. So you need to ensure security and all these access control policies that it cannot be hampered with. So, and it should be sustainable in a way that you need to take into care life cycle management and life cycles of several decades when it comes to infrastructure that is deployed in such a city. And how to deal with that is not easy. And many projects, many research projects, many programs tend to think that such an ecosystem should be based on open standards, complemented with certification programs in order to get, and since such things are essential for the acceptance and wide adoption, since it needs to be controllable, it needs to be also easily explained that data is used and it's securely used also to apply to all the privacy regulations, etc., etc. So it's not only a technological challenge. In summary, it's also a challenge of acceptance in the society. What does 1M2M bring to such an ecosystem? The point I'd like to highlight here is that 1M2M is capable of linking such distributed components and technologies in such end-to-end IoT systems. Why is this possible? So from the very beginning, 1M2M was designed to interwork with existing technologies, knowing that you don't start from the scratch. You usually have systems installed. So we started with small use cases. Even I think in 2012, home and some technologies within that could be related to smart cities, but it became all these domain-specific use cases were discussed, were analyzed, and then several core functions were defined, functions that might be useful for all the applications on top of infrastructure nodes in the cloud, but also on devices, gateways as such. Functions like registration, communication management, all security discovery, all what you need in order to put some new sensors into this system, and the sensor can be detected, it can register, and the data can be used and it can be controlled. So all these use cases are defined, and specific service functions are defined. This picture shows now how you might start in such an environment. You have this common service layer, depicts this software layer with these common service functions, and that sits on top all the connectivity technologies that are there, be it proprietary, be it wide area networks like all these 3GPP defined networks or LoRa, etc. What wireless LAN, whatever could be deployed in such systems. It could be also technology that is in-house in buildings whatsoever. So on top of that, you have such a service layer. As I said, it's deployed from devices, sensors towards the cloud, the infrastructure. Connected on top of that are applications on the infrastructure side, like for example, here such controller, it's called here legacy controller, since it might be an already installed controller. So you have an interworking proxy, as we call it, interworking functions towards applications. that are not standardized or that are not following the 1M2M standard. And you have the same as it's depicted here, maybe to some streetlights. And the data of some municipalities. You start with that, and this standard allows you to roll out new systems, to integrate with new systems that might be then 1M2M based. You can also on the infrastructure side introduce new dashboards, but you can also integrate and connect data to new applications in areas that are emerging or some analytic systems. Here you could think on all the applications that might be available in future, even introducing AI capabilities, machine learning whatsoever. So this is the goal, and such things can be enabled with this standard. A short view on the timeline. It was founded in. Sorry.
Yeah, just to hope you don't have too many slides left, because
no,
Christoph has joined in the end, so he will also follow you. He's online and he doesn't have too much time, I've heard. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah. This would have been my. I have one more slide, but I keep it very short. So I need 2 more minutes, if that's okay.
Yeah, it's okay. It's okay.
So, yeah. Okay. From this slide, I only want to point out many activities. It's not only the specifications of this standard. We have, in addition, interoperability events. So specifications, testing, and also relation to certification. Although we don't do the certification, it's GCF is the certification body. And in addition, we have also some hackathon events. You heard IEEE Hyderabad is one of those who had such hackathon events. And what specifications of 1M2M were also transposed by ITUT study group 20. You can see it here, it's the relation there, so it's part of the ITUT standards. And the very recent activity that I wanted to highlight here, also as a reach out and invitation to academia. It's called the Academia Relation Group, where we have gathered several universities from North America, Europe, and Asia, especially South Korea, to come together and either work with these specifications, define some student programs, and at the end, maybe also feedback to the specification as such to improve it and to maintain some of the tools we have. Having said that, my last slide here, it's an outlook of what we are currently planning for our latest release. So 4 releases are already done. So we are working currently on release 5, and it covers many of the use cases that came in from existing smart city deployments. It's methodologies to enable AI, so provide clean data, to say it short, to support data protection regulations, data license management. So typical use cases and functionalities that are requested by cities. Not to mention the public warning system enabler, but I will not read out this. The slides are distributed. You can have a read. In the backup, you find much more information and links. And I'm always happy to receive any requests if you have further questions. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you so much, Roland. Thank you for spinning up at the end. So Christoph, just to check if you're there. Totally was there.
Okay, sorry, I think I was just muted, but if you can hear me now.
Yeah, I understand we want to rush, so I'm not going to give you a full bio, but just one thing for the participants here. So Christophe Collinet is the Smart City Project Manager for Bordeaux Metropolis, one of the largest cities in France. since 2016 and is coordinating European projects and more specifically sharing cities, a European Horizon 2020 project, Lighthouse project. He's the Bordeaux representative within the Eurocities Digital Forum. Okay, thank you. Christophe, the floor is yours, and the game, you understood, 7 to 8 minutes max. Thank you very much.
Yeah, I will really try to keep in time. Thank you very much for welcoming me here, because it's a third time I'm with you. I was there for the first event, and for the second one, I think I was not there for the third, but I'm here for the fourth. Unfortunately, not in face-to-face, but at least I can reach out to you through technology. So I don't know if you can see my my screen, my presentation. Do you see it? No. Oh, okay. And there?
Yeah, it's coming. We have it.
Good. Okay. Thank you. Thank you very much. So I will try to illustrate a little bit what Roland just said before in the real world, in a specific case, which is the case of a city in France, which name is Bordeaux. And first of all, I wanted just to clarify why interoperability is key for us, and what is exactly interoperability. In fact, interoperability is maybe a generic concept that needs to be clarified in the context of my presentation today. And indeed, we could evoke a framework of legal interoperability in the case of a European Court of Justice, for example, but or cultural interoperability in the case of a common culture linked to history or religion. In this case, I like to focus on two types of interoperability. The technical interoperability, of course, and which relates to hardware and software interfaces linked to ICTs, and semantic interoperability, which consists in giving a common meaning and definition to the terms we use. And also to illustrate the benefits of technical interoperability for us, I'd like to describe a complex information system linked to the implementation of a seamless mobility service. This information system calls on numerous software bricks, themselves derived from multiple partners, both from the public or the private sector. You understand that the benefits of interoperability seem quite obvious in this case, insofar as each software brick exchanges information with one or more other software bricks. The result for the user depends on the entire processing chain. In this case, it is often the case in the daily life, where one of the partners disappears or withdraws from the market, it is essential not to have to rebuild everything, but simply to provide the definition of the interface. And to give you a few complementary examples from the daily life, the recent standardization of the USB-C charger as a single interface for recharging smartphones, laptops, and other small handheld device will save tons of copper every year and mean that we'll only have to use one type of charger for all our devices. Likewise, the 6G will continue the trend towards seamless cell phone connectivity on a global scale that began with the launch of GSM and 3GPP in the 80s. And finally, as I'm with you today, I couldn't fail to mention the implementation of electric vehicle charging station of two different types, Chinese and Japanese in Delhi, simply to address the problem of incompatibility between the two types. In the local authority sector, a wide range of tasks are carried out, from roads and public transport to water, sanitation, refuse collection, security, and so on. The information system of these different professions are often disconnected from one another, and the data from these systems is managed by suppliers according to their own norms and standards. These norms and standards differ from one sector to another, and if local authorities are to regain the ability to steer their public policies, it is essential to aggregate, compare, and evaluate all these data collected. Failing with which there will be an immediate loss of sovereignty on the part of local authorities. And on the other end, in order to collect, aggregate, and compare data from business information system, numerous interfaces need to be put in place to collect and standardize these data. We understand that these software interfaces need to be updated very frequently, and that this requires an enormous amount of process and engineering, which is incompatible with the low-tech, responsible digital vision we wish to promote. So, to go back to 1M2M, which is for us a glue to fix the interoperability issues I just described, to be able to meet these challenges and this cross-sectoral vision of our missions, we chose in Bordeaux to have to promote 1M2M standards to free ourselves from these business constraints. This enables us to interconnect devices directly using a variety of standards, like, for example, BACnet, Modbus, DALI for public for smart lighting, and so on, and via different telecom interfaces, GSM, Wi-Fi, LoRaWAN, and so on, and to collect data agnostically. The process is very simple for us, as all we have to do is just specify that the solution proposed by our suppliers must be compliant with 1M2M specifications. We have already been able to put this principle to the test as part of a Smart Light project in 2017, and we have repeated the experience as part of a national call for project on the energy renovation of buildings in 2022, a project worth over 5 million euros, for which we were the winning bidder and recipient of a grant of over 2 million euros. And this is also the European Commission approach. On a European scale, local authorities are keen to have a direct exchange with the Commission bodies in order to share their needs in the implementation of smart city solutions. This is the reason why the livingin.eu initiative was set up in 2020. It is a fruit of collaboration between 5 non-governmental associations representing local authorities, including Eurocities, I am a member of, and of course the Commission. In very concrete terms, this initiative supports 5 working groups led by elected people, mayors, or their representatives, to work on the themes of financing, training, legal, KPIs, and the last but not the least, technical aspects of a smart city implementation. Joining and contributing to this work is voluntary, but the feedback and exchanges between peers are so rich that the organizers are now a little overwhelmed by the number of participants. As part of the technical and interoperability working group, of which I am an active member, I've defined the concept of MIMs, minimum interoperability mechanisms. In fact, in the group, we realized that it was not necessary to standardize the entire value chain when implementing smart city solutions, but that certain interfaces were key and should be standardized. To sum up, 2 key interfaces were identified at the outset. The one concerning data collection, from sensors, and the one concerning the exploitation of collected data centralized in a data lake. As you can see from the side, 1M2M has been identified by the working group as one of the solutions meeting the MEMS principle mentioned above. And to conclude, these principles also enable us to rapidly develop solutions for measuring urban thermal comfort in Bordeaux. And at the Smart City Awards held in Barcelona, in Spain, at the beginning of November at the Smart City Expo World Congress, this solution was awarded the prize for the best smart city solutions of the year in the field of energy and the environment. We are increasingly convinced that thanks to the technical specifications offered by 1M2M, we are gaining in time, agility, and sustainability to develop solutions, especially for smart cities, which are compatible with the climate change we are facing. I hope I've enriched your thoughts on this subject, and thanks you very much for your attention.
Yeah, thank you very much, Christophe. Thanks a lot. So now the next speakers, now we have the three physical speakers. So we have the last three presentations, and then we will start the Q&A session. So our next speaker is Sri Sushil Kumar, Additional Director General Telecom DOT. Mr. Sushil Kumar is an officer of 1987 batch of Indian Telecommunication Services. He's done his graduation in Electronics and Communication Engineering in 1987 and Master in Computer Science and Technology in 1989 from University of Roorkee, presently known as Indian Institute of Technology, Roorkee. With more than 30 years of experience in telecom, IoT and ICT, he's presently working as Additional Director General Telecom for Northeast LSA at Shillong. Prior to this, he worked in TEC as Deputy Director General. Yeah, okay.
Yeah, thank you very much. I think presentation you can run, and you give me the pointer for changing the slides. Yeah, how to do? How to change it? Not working. Yeah, good afternoon. It's my pleasure and honor to share my views on the IoT and ICT technologies, creating a smart infrastructure for the smart cities and a large number of various verticals. So IoT is one of the most emerging technology being used to create the smart infrastructure in various verticals, say power, automotive, intelligent transport system, then the healthcare, safety and surveillance, waste management, then water management, smart homes, etc. And these smart homes and some of these verticals will work as a pillar for the smart cities. So smart cities will be having number of verticals, but how to integrate these verticals for sharing of data across the verticals. Next. For sharing of data between the verticals and between the smart city platforms, that is a very important and key items, and probably IIIT Hyderabad and 1M2M chair as well as the previous speaker, they have spoken about the 1M2M standards, that is said to be the first standards in the IoT domain, which in which we are having the common service layers, and this common service layer will provide a facility to share the data and also having the registrations and other features for the platform. So this ITU definition has defined this IoT as a global infrastructure, and it is in ITU TY.2060. Then almost all the communication technologies, whether it is non-cellular or cellular, can be used for the for the IoT domain. And the main challenge in the IoT domain, that is like the robust connectivity is required. The platform should have the open interfaces and interoperability. That is one of the biggest challenges as on date, as most of the platforms in the smart cities, they are built on proprietary standards, and they cannot share the data in real time between the platforms as well as between the verticals. So this challenge was also highlighted in the Horizon 2020, the document which was released by the European Union sometime in 2017, and it is really good to hear that they are also using the 1M2M platform for fixing the challenges. So now what India has done, and what TEC and DOT has done in policy and the standards, so that we can have a look. But this is not working. So you move next slide. Next. So this is a pictorial view how the devices can be connected, and all the use cases, whether they are working on 5G or other communication technologies, they are the IoT use cases. Next one. Next slide. This ITU has defined from this picture we can see the IoT platform, that is the smart city platform. They say it is the brain of the city, and if we want to keep the smart city smart for a long time, then we have to keep the platform based on the standards, and 1M2M standard that is the first standards across the globe on which the platform can be built up. And time to time, these specification can be upgraded so that the platform can adopt various applications to be which may come in future. Next slide. So these are next one. So DOT has released the policy NDCP, National Digital Communication Policy, in 2018, and which has included the 5G, artificial intelligence, robotics, Internet of Things, cloud computing, and M2M and the various verticals on which the department has to carry forward the work. Then further, the National Telecom M2M roadmap was released in 2015. Prior to this, M2M service provider registration policy have also been released in 2022. Then TEC, which is the technical arm of DOT, has worked on the IoT domain, M2M IoT domain, from 2013 onwards. And I started the work from the zero level in TEC in 2013, and till October 2023, we have carried out the work in this domain. And after that, on promotion, I joined as a additional DG in Shillong. So this the work which have been carried out in the last 10 years that in the IoT domain is mainly briefed in this presentation. So next slide. This in TEC we created the multi-stakeholder working groups to study the domain and further release the technical reports in sync with global standardization bodies such as ITU, ISO, IEC, ITC, 1M2M, 3GPP, IEEE, etc. And we released the 20 technical reports covering various verticals. Then the communication technologies, EMF radiation from the IoT devices, and IoT security. And in these technical reports, like in the power sector, we released 2 documents, and further 1 document is in progress on the smart grid. So this M2M enablement in power sector, and then the next one, the spectrum requirement for PLC and low power RF communication. And based on this recommendation, the 1 megahertz spectrum was released by DOT in 865 to 867, adding 1 megahertz to 868. Then the automotive sector, 4 to 5 documents have been released, and in the communication technology, released 3 documents in it, and 1 on M2M gateway and architecture. And further, in the security domain, we released 4 documents in this. Next. So all these work has been briefed in TEC initiatives and M2M IoT domain, an overview, and it is available on TEC website. And some of the documents like the technology and standards for intelligent transport system, as well as security by design for IoT device manufacturers. These documents have been appreciated globally. And out of these documents, 6 documents are available on ITU website. And there is a number of outcomes from these documents. Next slide. Like 13-digit numbering scheme for SIM-based devices that was developed by us, then embedded SIM, it is the part of AIS 140, and that is being used for the connected vehicle scenario across the country. And it has been mandated by the Ministry of Road Transport and Highways, and also by the Bureau of Indian Standards. Then the IPv6 or dual stack, it is the part of the BIS standard IS 16444. Then the common service layer, in it we have already adopted the 1M2M release 2 and release 3 as a national standard, and which has been incorporated by the BIS in its standards for the IoT reference architecture, and further which has been included by Ministry of Housing and Urban Affairs (MoHUA) in its RFP for the smart cities. Then the spectrum for cellular V2X, it has been mentioned. It has been earmarked recently, around 6 months back, and Niti Aayog formed a committee around 3 years back to finalize the technology for the intelligent transport system. And after that, the one policy paper was also floated. One note has been sent by DOT to Ministry of Road Transport and Highways to work on to create a group of industry as well as the government officers to finalize the use cases for the India based on cellular V2X technology. So these are some of the important work which have been going on. And then the IoT security is also one of the important work, because when there will be billions of devices, the hacking of the devices will create issues in the smart infrastructure. Next slide. Then this I've already mentioned, IIIT Hyderabad has already developed 1M2 based platform in release 2, and similarly CDAC is also having on release 2. CDOT is having on release 3. Now it is required to see the interoperability between the release 2 and release 3 platforms, and whether the 1M2M based platform can work with the non-1M2M based platform, so that the standard based solutions can be provided in future. Similarly, this U4 SSC KPIs have been adopted. Some of the KPIs have been adopted by Niti Aayog, and further by the this MoHUA. Next slide. This regarding intelligent transport system, the technology and standards for intelligent transport system, it was released in October 2023, and this document has been appreciated by industry not only in India but across the various countries. And it is having the study of the ITU, 3GPP, APT, IEEE, ITSC, ISO, SAE, 5G, and a number of use cases have been mentioned in this. One of the green corridor, which was created on DSRC technology in Ahmedabad on 700 megahertz, as well as on CV2X, some of the trials have been done in Hyderabad. They have been listed in this, and some of the international use cases and trials are also the part of this document. In India, as no technology has been adopted, therefore cellular V2X technology should be adopted, which is the recommendation of this document, and the spectrum has already been earmarked in this. Next slide. This is next slide. Yeah. So this yeah, sure. V2V, V2I, and V2P infrastructure that can be created in the cellular V2X. Now come to next slide. These are some of the use cases which can be created in the country for the 5G technology in automotive sector. Next slide. Now, security is a big issue in the for the smart infrastructure, and on this TEC has in TEC we have released 3 technical reports: security by design for IoT device manufacturers, framework of National Trust Center on which CDOT is already working, and code of practice for securing consumer IoT. And these security by design document has given the this cyber security labeling scheme for the IoT devices. And in fact, we have developed this labeling scheme even before so many other countries, and it is based on the study of the IoTSF Cyber Security Agency, Singapore, NIST standard 8425. Next slide. Yeah, next. This is the cyber security labeling scheme, and yesterday I had given a presentation to the Quad countries. It will be good to adopt this labeling scheme, because it will not be practically possible to frame the security specifications for the millions of devices, because when there will be billions of devices, the devices may be millions of in categories. So based on this, the testing mechanism can be created, and this similar type of labeling scheme is expected to come in ISO IEC document 274002, which is in draft stage and will be released around after 1.5 years. So it is based on various study of the national and international standards. Next slide. And now you can see the code of practice for securing consumer IT, and World Economic Forum, which has studied the cyber security related issues in the IoT devices. They have mentioned that the 5 principles should be followed by the manufacturers, and like A to E mentioned on the right side. But initially, Indian industries can follow the first 3 standards: no universal default password, implementing vulnerabilities disclosure policy, and keeping software updates. So initially they can follow. The security cannot be built up overnight. This, if we start following today by the manufacturers and other people, then we can say that after 2 to 3 years we can have the secure ecosystem in the country. So a National Trust Center that is being built up by the CDOT, we hope that it can be implemented within 2 to 3 years time. So DOT has already endorsed the code of practice for securing consumer IT to all the M2M service providers and the other stakeholders to follow at least the first 3 guidelines. And it's my view that once the first 3 guidelines are followed by the manufacturer, then we can add further guidelines. And the cyber security labeling scheme, as well as the recommendation of the security by design document, they are being implemented in the security specifications by the NCCS Bangalore for the to create the security requirements for the IoT devices for India. Next slide. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, sir. So I think I'll cut short the presentations to give you more time. So the next speaker is Sri Jagan Shah, Resident Senior Fellow, ARTA International. Just one line, Jagan Shah is a Senior Fellow at ARTA Global Mumbai and Distinguished Fellow at the InfraVision Foundation, New Delhi. Thank you.
Thank you. I guess the more appropriate introduction to me would be that I was involved in designing the Smart Cities mission of the Government of India when I was heading the National Institute of Urban Affairs, NIUA, which is mentioned in the release document. I'm not going to show any slides. I'm just going to take a few minutes to share some reflections. I don't come from the standard side. I come from the policy side. In a sense, standards are a necessary condition for achieving policy goals, and I work on those policy goals. And from that perspective, I think to start with, I think it's very heartening to see that the ecosystem has evolved over the last roughly seven to 8 years to such a point that we are now talking about integrating, collaborating, and cooperating across boundaries between India and EU, and actually sharing best practices in a much more concrete way. When we started thinking about the Smart Cities mission in 2014, this was still a conversation that needed to be pushed really hard because it wasn't happening. And I'm really happy to see that we're having this kind of conference. A few thoughts to share, because I feel there are challenges to integration and standardization which still need to be addressed. And perhaps some of the systems design issues which create those challenges would be worth focusing on. First and foremost, I've been working on green public procurement systems, and India is moving very fast towards digital procurement systems. And that is a very important entry point into the standards conversation. Mr. Sushil Kumar just mentioned something about the way that specifications were entered by the Ministry of Housing and Urban Affairs into their procurements for the smart cities mission. This is the control point. This is where the rubber hits the road. If specifications do not include the right kinds of standards, you do not achieve actually the action on ground. So procurement systems, which are not actually addressed very well in this report, do need to be included very much in our conversation on policy. There is an enormous thrust right now on creating a single market mechanism across the country, and we need to learn from the European Union's creation of a unified market in the EU region. The GST platform, for instance, which is the only real mechanism by which all of India has been united, that platform is yielding data and yielding insight, which is yet to be fully understood. But what it does show to us is that, again, the transactional aspects of the Indian economy are precisely where a lot of the entry points might be for us to address the whole conversation on standards. And for people who are into the research and R&D aspects of this, I would recommend that they certainly look at this aspect more closely. I'm surprised to see that we're not having enough conversation about India's huge world-renowned expertise on creating digital public infrastructure and digital public goods. DPGs, as they're called, are a good that the European Union recognizes, and there are countries in Europe that themselves are developing similar kinds of systems, and countries like Estonia, of course, have taken it to its logical extent. But this becomes really crucial when we talk about the scaling up that is required. We are talking about India, which is a country which is the most populous country in the world. And therefore, the scale at which these smart technologies and interoperability needs to be implemented is quite staggering. And therefore, we need to keep in mind that while there are similarities in the two markets, EU and India, there are also huge differences. And I think one very big difference is the rate of growth. And interoperability, standards, all of this is great when you're talking about, say, for instance, a context like IIIT Hyderabad, where there is a campus and it is a contained environment with boundaries. But the moment you look at the urban sector in India, it's almost a completely boundless, continuously growing organism. And in that kind of system, how do you maintain standards, or how do you implement standards, except if you do it right at the outset, if technologies are designed in order to comply with standards. And therefore, the role of OEMs, the role of manufacturing level standardization is really crucial, not necessarily the systems integration through the operational systems that cities might need to put up. So in that fundamental sense, we need to understand the difference. I do also understand that in our conversations, we tend to not address the digital divide that exists because, again, Europe probably does not face this digital divide. But in India, in the smart cities, when we looked at just the 100 smart cities, we found that close to 40% of that population did not have regular access to digital devices like computers, and certainly had mobile phones, but did not have connectivity all the time, and so on and so forth. So there is a barrier here to digital access itself, which India needs to address. But I think the DOT, for instance, is making great progress on making sure that every Indian citizen has access. So that also has changed over the last 7 years in a very positive way. Just a few quick thoughts about some priority areas which we are trying to address in India, which make a difference to the economic development of the country. One will be the ability for us to transfer some kind of green credits or carbon credits to the consumer themselves, a reward mechanism, not just a city as an entity capturing the gains from efficiencies and decarbonization, but individual consumers also and communities gaining from it. And how do we make that possible? That requires a huge level of data integration and data management. The smart metering, whether it is of water, electricity, all levels of smart metering are really crucial. I'm currently involved in a electric smart meter pilot in the only city in the country that has piloted a smart metering system, Chennai, in 3 of their municipal wards. And the kinds of data that is coming out of that system is quite staggering, but we still don't have the capabilities to actually analyze it and turn it into policy inputs that are necessary. Microgrids, the decentralization is the crucial story here. And therefore, how do you make that decentralization happen with inclusion? It's one thing for companies to decentralize the entire renewable energy infrastructure, but what about the last miles? What about those small villages where it needs to also be implemented? And there, it is not likely to be that the larger urban-based companies are operating. How does the consumer become a producer as well and get integrated into the grid? This is a crucial thing. I think in terms of cross-border energy, the International Solar Alliance is one of India's big plays on the international scene, and several European countries are very much stakeholders in that. The One Sun, One World, One Grid initiative is exactly about trans-border sharing and stabilizing actually of renewable grids, and that needs to be looked at, and again is not mentioned in the report. One of the last things I want to say is that Niti Aayog, India's premier sort of think tank for the government of India, has several years ago initiated this whole talk about plug and play infrastructure. And I think that currently is, of course, being talked about in terms of battery swapping and battery charging infrastructure, but that needs to permeate across the system, mainly because we are trying to make transitions towards decarbonization and make shifts in people's use of technology. And that shift means that you're dealing with a very large proliferation of all kinds of levels of technology and qualities of machinery and devices. And so in order to accommodate that large diversity, we need to really think about how to look at plug and play kind of interface where that integration can begin to take place, and where also consumer choice can begin to be influenced, because behavior change is actually one of our big challenges. The change from going for second, third generation kind of not generation but second hand, third hand kind of devices to actually buying original devices, that change, unless it happens, you will always be burdened with very inefficient devices coming into the system and very difficult to manage. My last point is that to come back to procurement, is that increasingly contracts are going to be given out as bundles of say, for instance, if you're giving an EPC contract for a city street redevelopment, then that street redevelopment includes telecom networks, includes electricity, includes various other kinds of networks embedded in the street, as well as, of course, the hardware of the street itself, light poles and such like. And when those kinds of bundled contracts become more the norm, how are we going to write those specifications into the procurement systems is going to be a big question. So I'm going to stop there because I think these are the key thoughts I thought I'd put on the table. I'm happy to be the only real policy person talking here, but that's wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jagan. I think you shed a different type of light, which is very needed. And I think we'll have another different type of light coming here. I will just say one word. Yeah, sorry. So, yeah, where are you? Kishore. Yeah, Kishore Narang. So Kishore is a technology advisor, mentor, design strategist, and architect in electronics and ICT for over 45 years. So he says he doesn't need it, but a lot of
I think people know me around. Okay. In India, at least people know me around, and so I don't need any introduction. And till we get the system up. So I think what I'm going to talk is, as you all know, I'm a system design architect as well as now into big time standardization for last 15 years. And my focus is on the digital infrastructure, end-to-end comprehensive. Okay. So what I'm going to talk about is only two things. I'm going to touch upon initially our National Smart City Mission's approach and thought process, just to contextualize what kind of standardization initiatives we have taken in India. I being the founding chair of a smart infrastructure committee responsible for developing the standards, end-to-end standards, including the architectures for the smart city, to say. But I think before we get into the topic of smart city and standardization or policies, I think I'd like to touch upon a few current imperatives that are very, very important to contextualize today. Yes, we started this work maybe 8-10 years back. Some of these topics might not have been prominent, but today I think whatever we look at, we need to look at in the context of this current landscape and imperatives. We all are talking climate change. I'm not going to run through all these, but climate change, energy security, clean and green energy, energy efficiency, electricity access, global digital population, which is growing every day. Okay, then digital transformation. But then when we talk about digital transformation, we also need to look at the growing carbon footprint of digital infrastructure. Then, along with the digitalization and digital transformation, what comes very important is meaningful, safe digital life for the citizens of the world. And the transformation from Industry 4.0 to Industry 5.0 with sustainability at the forefront. And whatever kind of society we may lead, sustainability and resilience is one of the, you can say, foundational cornerstone that we need to keep in mind. Whatever digital infrastructure, smart standard that we bring on the table, they need to. And then last but not the least, how do we control the greenwashing that's all underway? Having said that, what does it show? The evolution we never expected. And on the other hand, at the bottom, you see we are talking all futuristic technologies. And that brings the question is the future of life on Earth. And we have seen that in the last couple of centuries, the technologies that have evolved are responsible for all this environmental catastrophe that we are facing today. A lot of people think that we are on the verge of, there's no way back. But I think when technology has created these problems, I think it has solutions also for this. But all the same, we need to use our ingenuity, because today nature no longer runs the Earth. We do. And climate is not politically strong enough to fight the carbon itself. And with this context, let's get on to our national initiative on the smart cities. And the background, as you all know, it is all about 100 city pilots with 100 million people to be affected. And these are imperatives which you already know. And we were talking about, we call it a mission transformation, we don't call it a mission of smart cities or whatever. Okay, and it is all about that Indian smart cities are evolving as connected, livable, energy efficient, adaptive and resilient cities using cutting edge emerging technologies. And these are some of the basically 3 core issues that our smart cities address: ease of living, economic ability and sustainability. And for this, we have these mission projects on quality of life, economic ability, sustainability. And through the smart cities framework, we are looking at the services, finance, planning, technology, and governance. But at the core of it is all about data. And there are some other initiatives of the government on these particular aspects: urban resilience, smart governance, connected communities, competitiveness, and ease of living. And for this, all focus is on data, data, and data. And you all know, and these are a lot of initiatives on data itself. So, sorry. Yeah, so these are a lot of already collaterals that are developed and initiatives on the data side. And basically, our mission has a strategy to institutionalize the culture of data in Indian cities and to assess and tap the potential of data in cities and driven innovation city data officers. Every city has a data officer who is the flag bearer of the Open Data Initiative. And I think some people have already talked about the Urban Data Exchange in the morning, I think in one of the sessions, and it is all about that. And now let me bring that, how the work in BIS, our National Standards body, has tried to dovetail or meet the imperatives expectation of our mission. So if you look at the features of a smart city, these were some of the 24 features identified by our Minister of Housing and Urban Affairs way back. And when we look at them as a ICT IoT lens, we see that they are all the ICT IoT has opportunities, all these domains, verticals. I'm getting distracted, please. Sorry. And ICT and IoT has opportunities in all these use cases. But what is the problem? The problem is if you take a sample business case of the smart infrastructure, like everybody talked about today also, that we are looking at 250 million smart meters under National Smart Grid Mission beyond smart city. We are looking at so many, about 100 plus million smart street light. And every vertical, if we start adding smart water, smart sewage, smart environment, all these, we actually come up with a figure of up to 5 to 10 billion communication modules and about 10 to 50 million gateways that we are going to need for our civic and critical infrastructure, not talking about any private enterprise business applications. But this is a big number. Do we see it? No. Why? Because the market is totally fragmented. Different communication technologies, protocols, they have, overtaken all this and fragmented the whole market. Because current applications also live in silos. So what is the way forward? What do? We need to look at the interoperability between these silos. And this is a very famous for this thing, that we need interoperability at all the layers, right from the business layer, function layer, information layer, communication layer, and the component layer itself. And how do we achieve it? If you look at this simplified ICT architecture of this thing, these are some the layers that the data flows through from devices to the all the dashboards, and from where the government or the stakeholders can take some insights and actionable insights. So if you look at this, the layer of the information flow, so these are the 7 layers, the equivalent OSI model, and we map it with a smart infrastructure philosophy, these 4 pillars that our mission had identified: physical infrastructure, social infrastructure, economic, and institutional infrastructure. What we see is only these 2 upper layers, need to change, or as part of the user's requirement to derive value from different infrastructure pillars, but the ICT or IoT backbone can, or rather should, remain the same. So what do? We need to look at how do we now make it a unified architecture. So we came up with this kind of an approach, that whatever are the common layers, can we compress them into one common layer and common this thing? And that's what we did, and came up with this kind of a unified architecture. And this is basically, we call it a classic saucer champagne glass architecture model, because instead of hourglass architecture that is very famous in internet parlance, and even 1MTM, we talk about one common narrow hourglass architecture with a very short, narrow neck there. We identified 4 different macro layers that need to be standardized, and that would be, bring the interoperability. And those 4 layers are unified last mile communication, standardized gateways, then common service layer in the gateways as well as in the cloud, and then smart city middleware, including the urban data exchange, common data layer, and other lot of things. And this basically architecture, or the model, talks about this as a the bottom base depicts the multitude of field devices and sensors, and saucer-shaped bowl on the top depicting being filled with ever-increasing spectrum of city applications and citizen services. The long stem depicts all the common layers: the unified last mile communication, common standardized gateways, application or vertical agnostic, common service layer representing the common service functions in the gateways as well as in the cloud. And I think 1MTM has been talked about enough. I'll not elaborate much. It is all about 1MTM, this common service layer. And as well as the smart city middleware and city data reservoir in the cloud. Now, it is this long stem of the champagne glass model instead of the short and narrow neck in the hourglass model that brings comprehensive harmonization, standardization, and interoperability in the architecture, leading to optimization in operational efficiency and life cycle cost of the ICT infrastructure in any smart city. The architecture model, beyond reducing significantly the capital expenditure, the operational expenditure, and carbon footprint of the digital infrastructure, enables a unified and well-architected infrastructure that can be easily designed to be comprehensively resilient and cyber secure also. So, and beyond this, This is all about the upper layer. There's another major gap which we identified in BIS is about the OT and IoT, this thing. What we realized that there is evidently a glass wall barrier between communication protocols and standards for IoT applications and that of infrastructure and industrial use cases, popularly called OT applications. In spite of evidence appreciation of strengths and weaknesses of both the classes of standard, there has been no initiatives by any global SDO or industry consortium on this aspect. And we thought it's time to break this wall. And we took an exercise in this direction to break this thing and come up with a unified last mile communication protocol stack reference architecture. And this is a typical, I'm not going into much detail, but what we came up with was that in this reference architecture, what we realized that different communication technologies, whether mesh, whether point-to-point, whether cellular, whether any other 2G, 3G, 4G, 5G, 6G, any combination, or even wired, even wireless, they all can interwork seamlessly as long as we have our common application layer and where we can do. And we have standardized this stack. And you heard about Wyson mesh, this thing that is part of our standardized stack for the RF mesh, but it can work across different kind of use cases, topologies, and all that, because for interoperability, what we need is an application L4, 5, 6, and 7. We need to standardize. We have standardized data models. We have standardized the application layer. We have standardized the device management standard, which is the 1M2M. LWM2M is our device management standard. So based on these initiatives, I can show you these is a rather dated list. Yeah, I'm finishing. I'm just on the conclusion. This is a very dated this thing. We already have another 10, 15 more standards already published from BIS around the smart city by this LITD 28 committee. And what exactly did we learn out of this? I think based on these initial set of system standards already published, cities are being encouraged to update their respective deployment strategies by including these standards in the future solution RFPs. The various guidelines, indices, and maturity and assessment frameworks are being recalibrated to ensure compliances to these standards. The technology, product, system, solution providers are aligning their respective offerings to comply to the published standards, and these standards have enabled the sustainable digital transformation of urban landscape by enabling optimization of digital infrastructure in a technology agnostic, vendor agnostic manner, opening the floodgates of structured innovation by academia, researchers, startups, and industry at large. These initiatives have actually created a healthy competitive environment for the industry with level playing field for big and small enterprise, leading to new synergies among innovative startups and large organizations to collaborate to develop standard-based technology solutions for smart city. These standards actually have been developed in accordance with the practice principles at the IEC. We did some work on the smart city reference architecture methodology and smart city reference architecture. We leverage those global practices here, and we are now bringing this unified digital infrastructure architecture standards back to the global SDOs. So basically, what do we learn from these? These standards shall help bring lifecycle cost of digital infrastructure down substantially because of the standard-based interoperable system components available through multiple vendors, along with making resilient and cybersecurity and trustworthy. The 100 smart cities acting as a living lab and test bed for innovation have provided a vast body of knowledge based on actionable insights to city planners, administrators, technology solution providers, and deployers to bring comprehensive homogeneity in the heterogeneous and fragmented ecosystem. However, it is still work in progress, and continuous new learnings are being imbibed to leverage in updating the national standardization strategy and roadmap for sustainable digital transformation of urban landscape. So the last key takeaway is that we need to rethink when we talk about smart cities, prioritization of infrastructure. The premise of smart city has evolved from a technology-centric project to one that leverages technology to create sustainable and citizen-centric environment. It is no longer enough to simply to deploy sensors. Companies and government need to demonstrate meaningful impact on the population. Keeping pace with the challenges presented by COVID-19 and other imperatives, escalating sustainability commitment, and ongoing population growth will require unprecedented urban investment and innovation. We see digital infrastructure as pivotal to smart city evolution. I think I'll not bore you with this, but thank you very much for this. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Right, so I would like to thank all the speakers. I'm not very sure how long we have for discussion because we're quite behind schedule, but how long do we have? Do we know? Anybody wants to ask any questions to the panelists? Make any comment? Everything was clear. There's a question. Yeah. Margot?
Bonjour.
Yeah.
C'est bon? Oui, bonjour. Good afternoon. One of the speakers, although online, talked about the challenge of acceptance in society. And it's true that for much of the, we've been talking about smart cities for long. And it's true that in some of the areas, it looks like, whether it's for transport, for example, it looks like this remains one of the key challenges. It's not a technical one, it's a societal one. And I wanted to know how you guys address this at the same time as the interoperability and so forth and so on. Thank you.
Can we just, the challenge is, sorry, because.
Acceptance by society.
So yeah, acceptance, okay. Anyone wants to? Hold on, I don't know if you're still there. Doesn't sound like it. Anybody wants to?
So I think society looks at what? They look at the convenience of the deployment of the technology and the user friendliness. They are citizens. They don't understand the complexity behind our standards, our technology architectures, and all those. What they need is, has the technology being deployed in a user or customer or citizen friendly manner? If it is done and it's ease of use, ease of interfaces, or the apps or applications, the dashboard that you provide on the smart city platforms, if they are user friendly, I think they will not have any problem. They are rather keen. They are today not tech savvy anyway. I think that is where we need to look at. Whatever we provide, it has to, the front face has to be very user friendly, very easily, rather than complicated.
Jagan or Sushil, would you like to add something, or?
So, I think certainly there was a point mentioned about building greater confidence and trust. I guess the word trust wasn't used, but the fact that by integrating these systems and making the data more freely available, you do build confidence in society and trust. And I think that's definitely the direction in which India is also moving. We do have an open data platforms, as well as not only in smart cities, but at a national level as well. It needs to accelerate, and that will require a lot of the ecosystem partners to come on board, but we're moving in that direction.
Thank you. Sushil?
Smartphone, this is a smart device which is used by the user, and mostly the apps and the data from the smart cities or the any sort of information that is transmitted to the user on the smartphone. And I think most of the people in the country, they are able to know how to use the smartphone. So once we create the smart system, we have to develop the smart people also. Now they will automatically get created.
Thank you.
Yeah, one more small point. I think if we involve citizens in the part of the planning and designing the city, I think that will bring more confidence and trust into the system that we are doing. If we bring them on consultation on board while designing this thing, like our smart city mission, when they did the complete scheme or the proposals, they had, I think, pretty high weightage for the citizen participation.
6 million people participated. Yeah.
Margot, does it answer your question, or do you want to ask something else? Thank you. Anybody else wants to ask any question, or you want to have your tea break just behind us? Unless you want to ask a questions to each of you internally. If not, we're gonna have it. Fine. Okay, thank you very much for you. And if anybody else is still online, thank you very much. And thanks for all the, yeah, right. All right, so Sushil, thank you. Okay.
And Laurent is the speaker.
Okay, thank you. Right, okay.
Priya, why don't you also join?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, you need to join.
Just to make the city smart.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
That was the answer to Margaret's question.
So we'll be starting our next session soon. The tea and coffee is served over here only. And Mr.
Hello, can you hear me? Can you hear me? I'm audible. Perfect. Thank you.
Good evening. We'll be starting with our next session. You can bring your coffee and bring your tea. So bring your own thing has become now a very popular term, but I'm not using the B word anymore. We are going to have a panel discussion, which will be moderated by Mr. Jagan Shah, who's the senior fellow at Artha Global. He has served as director of India's National Institute of Urban Affairs and senior infrastructure advisor in the UK government Department for International Development from 2019 to 2021, and senior advisor capacity building at World Bank. He's co-created India's Smart Cities mission and played a key role in designing and implementing several other urban innovation programs for the Government of India. He incubated the Center for Digital Governance, the Sanitation Capacity Hub, and the Climate Center for Cities at NIUA, as well as led the design of Cities program funded by the French Development Agency, AFT. So I would request Jagan to kindly take it from here on, and also invite all our panelists, whoever is here. And so Orindam, Margot, Kishore sir, to be here, and we'll shortly be, I think Wim will be joining us shortly, as he's still in the data privacy and cybersecurity session, which is going on. Yeah, and Lohit. Hi, Lohit. So thank you so much for coming. Jagan, floor is all yours.
If I understand correctly, Mr. Sudhendu Sinha is not here. Andreas Neubacher? Yeah. Okay. Okay, Andreas is already there. So actually, we'll start with Andreas. Thank you all for joining us for this session. This is somewhat different from the previous session because this is focused very much on taking inputs from the panelists on what are the gaps and challenges as highlighted in the study report, which has been circulated to all participants. And hopefully we'll be able to address that in a very focused way. If you could just share your specific inputs on that. I have also requested each of the panelists to share what are the topics on which they would like to focus their attention. And I think since we will start with our online participant, Mr. Andreas Neubacher from 1M2M and the Deutsche Telekom, I'll request Andreas to address the issue of the interoperability and seamless integration that would be necessary for the Indian grid to absorb renewable energy, and what we can learn from the EU experience in this regard. But Andreas, if you'd like to address any other points, please do so. Over to you. Thank you.
Okay, can you hear me? Okay,
Yeah.
sorry.
We can't see your slides in case you're using slides.
No, I'm not using slides.
Thank you.
I'm just in the hotel room, and as you have seen, probably the connectivity is not as good. You know, I was listening and watching, let me say, the previous session, and everything was fine. But anyway, yeah, thank you very much for being invited to participate at this panel. What's necessary for let me say a sustainable grid? I think so. The challenge is that the intermediate renewables, you know, that they feed in the energy not on a constant source, and we cannot control them. And yeah, I think the pieces for, let me say, putting together this puzzle are already there. You know, we have the standards. We have already heard about, for example, smart cities. So they are exchanging data also between different parts. I think so. There are some cornerstones which are necessary, let me say, to enable this. So the question is, I've heard about previous speakers told about behavior change. We need to introduce a behavior change of the market participants, the producer and the consumer. For this, we can think about a regulatory framework. We can either force, for example, the consumers and producers, or we can get an incentive, a financial incentive for them to behave accordingly. And of course, and it also needs a technical solution for it. And from a technical solution, we cannot talk about proprietary solution or standardized solution. And also for this one, we have solutions like, for example, 1M2M. This just as an introduction and some thoughts about how we can solve this challenge.
Thank you, Andreas, and do stay with us because we'd like to engage in a discussion as we go forward. So in terms of the opening thoughts, I'd like to now move to Mr. Arindam Bhattacharya, who's the group leader at CDOT. Arindam, if I can just request you to address one key point which has been talked about in this report is the development of innovation ecosystems and incubation of new technology solutions as well. CDOT is now very much a national level incubator of innovative tech. You're sitting right at the heart of that whole innovation ecosystem. What in your mind is going to be the opportunities and challenges related to developing this ecosystem in India, and how can we learn or get support from the European Union for developing?
Yeah, thank you very much. First of all, the organizers to give me this opportunity to actually share my point of view. And CDOT, when it forayed into IoT M2M, and particularly with standardization, we felt there's a need to create an ecosystem because in India, everybody who was talking about IoT M2M was doing it in their own proprietary way. And when we further, tried to explore, we found that it is mostly kind of monopolized by large players. So despite India being called a kind of cauldron for startups, and we call ourselves a startup economy, our startups rarely found a way in smart cities. You see, 100+ smart cities have already been rolled out, and how many startups have really made a dent there? A very handful. You can't count more than 10, 20. So that is insignificant when we see the sheer magnitude of startups who claim to be doing innovative work. So CDOT, being a core R&D organization, didn't feel like deep diving into use cases. We felt that we should grow like our legacy has been, creating an ecosystem where the industry thrives. We do R&D and then put it to the industry to take it forward, and use cases should be done by them. So from the very beginning, way back in 2014, we kind of mooted this idea that we will develop the core standardization, will promote standardization, will be the advocate for standardization, and at the same time will create an ecosystem where startups and other industry players, we didn't limit ourselves to startups alone. We felt that many places startups might find it a very humongous task to actually scale the ladder. So in that sense, we felt that it should be open, not only to the startups, but to large organizations also. Come forward, we'll do the handholding, we'll take you forward. Together, we'll create a standardized ecosystem, and then we'll approach the industry in a fashion that they are all interoperable, and the ecosystem should be such that it talks about standardization. So in that process, we went ahead. We started creating our own platform for IoT, and alongside we took all these startups together. And thankfully now it has been institutionalized. We have opened a center of innovation where more than 100 companies have registered. More than 30 odd organizations have already rolled out their applications, which are standards compliant. There are more in the pipeline. We are not having enough bandwidth to actually support them, but they are there. At the same time, we have also opened up new schemes for funding also to creating innovative technologies outside IoT as well. So our 4G, 5G solutions, we are creating the incubation centers for them, the organizations who are coming forward with their innovative solutions to develop solutions. So we know that everything cannot be done by a single company. So it has to be a collaborative effort. So that collaboration will yield better results and a faster results. And that has been our thought process, and we are moving ahead.
Thank you, Arindam. I think that's a very encouraging layout of what CDOT is able to do in India. The very fact that you're able to create that ecosystem is itself quite heartening to know. I'm going to change the order a little bit just to come to Margot. Margot, Arindam just talked about the fact that in the 100 smart cities, we saw evidence of sort of the operation of almost a monopoly kind of situation where big operators were, or big companies were providing all of the solutions. You must have faced the similar situation in the European Union, perhaps still do face it in some countries. How has the European Union dealt with this challenge of breaking the predominance of big players? Yeah?
How much time do you have?
It's a long story.
It's a long story. No, but I remember, just as a matter of anecdote, I remember very well when we were starting to discuss the 1 and 2 and 3 here, and indeed we had the idea, the whole idea of this hackathon was, if you remember, to create an IoT app store, because the whole thing was about precisely to make sure that you could have developments from some things that should be bottom up really. I think your question touches upon one of the challenges I wanted to highlight. Smart cities as being one of these subjects. Originally, Etsy was working very much on business-to-business standards. So you had suppliers and operators, but making standards so that networks could be connected, etc. With subjects like smart cities, which is an umbrella for many different subjects, you see the advance of, and it's probably not the case in Senelec or others or BIS, etc., because you guys have been standardizing refrigerators or user things. But in Etsy, for Etsy, it's been a challenge because it's been one of the first subjects where it was business to citizen and business to consumer. And you're right, we're not culturally ready for that. And because we needed to have the incorporation of population, so not only what you call small guys, but also user, citizens, and so forth and so on, which were not part of the ecosystem. And it's one of the big challenges in general standardization has. I would say broadly with digitalization, if you think all services, including public services, are being provided now online, it means that now you need really the input of the people who are at the other end of the line in standardization. The problem, and we've seen it since this morning, standardization is hard to sell. It's hard to show the benefit if it's not immediately tangible for users. So it is one of the challenges we are fighting all the time with. Now in Europe, there's been some policies to try and address some policy sorry, devices to try and address this. For example, in the legislation on standardization, they've added in an annex official representatives of consumers, of environmental associations, of SMEs, etc., to the standardization. They finance a lot of participation of this. It's progress. It's not perfection yet, provided it will ever be, because it's actually a big cultural shift for everyone. And also, even if you finance and nominate an association to say, okay, I represent consumers, they don't necessarily have the expertise, they don't necessarily have the time, they feel overwhelmed when they arrive in the technical committees. So it's an uphill battle. You're right. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Margot. I'm going to shift to Lohit. Lohit, you are tech and innovation head at Siemens Advanta. Siemens is a behemoth. It's a conglomerate with a global presence and pretty much leads the pack in many technologies. How do you view the small guys that Margot just talked about? I imagine that a big corporation would look at them as being sort of the cutting edge of innovation that you can absorb into your thinking in the best case. But is that really the case? And give us a sense of how you would look at that in the building energy efficiency space as an example, just a way to kind of understand how that works, please.
Thank you. Thanks for this opportunity, organizers. And so I'm talking on behalf of Siemens here. Coming back to the question, I think we have discussed about the problems what we have in this space of smart city in terms of interoperability, connectivity, the sensors or the products which are supplied. It's not possible that one organization, be it any big size it may, it's impossible to supply to the demands and to solve all the problems. It has to be a collaborative approach, including startups, the small organization, big ones. The world itself is moving towards collaboration, right? So that's the way forward. No one can solve the problems what we have. Each country, be a part of the country, has its own challenges when it comes to implementation, be it installation, connectivity, and then operations, right? So all these are different level of challenges. And as Siemens, we also look forward for the startups to come up with ideas, and we go with partnership with them to bid and implement big projects, right? I can quote few examples. So we were the smart city implementation partners for Dubai Expo, which happened in 2020 and in 2021. We had a lot of Indian startups participated there. It was an ecosystem for us to exhibit how things can work in realizing the smart city use cases in terms of making the buildings efficient, the building operations, and be it any part of the city. It could be the electricity supply, the waste management, plantation, water management, people, parking, any of these use cases. It's an ecosystem of small, big, all scale of organizations coming together, to solve all these problems. So that's how I put it across.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Lloyd. That helps a lot. That specific example illustrates the point. Kishore, you wear two very important hats. One is that you yourself are an engineer and you're an entrepreneur, so you know how to make things. And you're also an evangelist for standardization. From your perspective, help us to understand at least two key gaps that we need to plug if we need to create this ecosystem for smart city development in the future. Two.
Yeah, so I think first is the standards. My observation is whatever people may harp about standards, the business case for standardization has not been really made to the end-to-end stakeholders. Okay, it's by chance or by experience, by making mistakes, people start understanding the value of standardization. Otherwise, nobody likes it. And I'll give you three stakeholders example. Like young startup innovators, the so-called the new breed. For them, standard block innovation, there's a de facto standard answer. No, standard block innovation. Now, big companies talk about behemoths. They only like standard which they have helped evolve. They do not like to change their solutions to comply to something standard which is different. So I'm just talking initial resistance, psychology. Then, but it was when we started doing our BIS work, it was a music to my ear when Mr. Kunal took over as a mission director, and he invited me. He said, "Kishore, I heard you are trying to do some standardization around smart cities." I said, "Yes, what kind of standard?" He said, "In BIS, I'm not interested in global standard, I'm interested in IT." When I told him that we are trying to come up with a unified digital infrastructure approach where all these verticals working in silo will be able to work as a unified, interoperable manner, whether they are device to device level or at the platform level, data sharing at the cloud level. He said, yeah, that's what we want. But that was because he had been a CEO of a Pune city where he had faced this problem that when multiple solutions are integrated for a common city dashboard, it takes 1.5 to 2 years to integrate. So I think we still, even today, we find like then Mission took over, really underwritten all the standards in BIS, but still we found really a major problem in the city CEOs or their individuals to proactively participate in standards. That is one of the things. So we need end-to-end.
So one gap is the acceptability of standards.
Understanding the value, not acceptability.
Okay,
Acceptability, they do it by compulsion.
Okay.
But that's not the way. They need to understand the value. Business case for this, understanding the value. Second is the innovation itself. Now, the way I look at it, the startups and MSME and big organizations, they play a complementary role in such kind of an ecosystem. There's no competition. Why? Because big companies, they have some large backend solutions and all that. But when it comes to bringing a lot of small plugins and all that, this is where all the startups and MSME can really add value and to them, because they don't need to redo that. They just need to tell them that, look, this is my basic platform. Can you integrate? You got the solution. Can you just customize it to integrate into my system, even if it's not a standard base? Let's not talk standard right now. Okay, complementarity of these two ecosystems is basically organic, but the point is there's a lot of resistance. It only goes, but today we hear all the big companies, Googles and all these acquiring small startups. Why? Because of their innovation capabilities, their agility in innovation. I think any organization, any big organization who has understood this, they are quite open, but then they are a bit selective, which for business reasons, I won't comment on.
Okay, thanks. No, thanks very much. Andreas, are you still with us?
Yes, of course.
Thanks, Andreas. Andreas, next question is to you. Deutsche Telekom is again also a very large telecom company, and I imagine that you deal with a variety of demands from different cities in the country, very smart cities like Freiburg, and also cities with lots of different economic activities like Düsseldorf or Frankfurt. How does Deutsche Telekom view the agglomeration of lots of different demand, and what challenges does that pose to the implementation of standards? I hope that question makes sense.
Yes, it reflects the reality.
Okay.
The point is, let me first of all say, okay, I'm in standards, and colleagues of mine, they are implementing these standards we are working on also within the core, A colleague of mine is working on a product which is based on 1M2M for this reason. So we believe in it. But in fact, some of the previous speakers have already hit the nail. Margot is saying, okay, standards are hard to sell, because it's not a product. We have heard about, let me say, by Mr. Kishore or Narang, for example, that a standard is needed also for a foundation for the interworking, and we have also heard, let me say, the reality from Laureate about the small companies, the silos. So what we see is that a lot of companies are coming up, and also cities coming up into demand, provide me a solution based on this and this. And here we have also competition, not among, let me say, different silos, proprietary silos. We have also competition somehow between different organization standards sometimes. So in this respect, I think it's good to have also some, let me say, guidance by policy. So if I look at the European Union, I'm also a fan of renewables, also from private point of view, as also from professional point of view. The EU has issued this Electricity Market Directive, EMD, and also the Renewable Energy Directive, RED, for example. So one of the parties is the, for example, citizen energy communities. So they set, let me say, the direction from the policy point of view to allow, for example, producers and consumers, to sell, let me say, the electricity, the energy directly. So this is the driver we have to have a kind of behavior change to introduce to also cope with the renewable problem of demand and consumption, to bring it, let me say, in a balance. So there's a financial benefit. So on the one hand side, there is also, let me say, dynamic rate plans available now, for example, to issue this plan. And what's needed for all of this is a common foundation, a common language between the producers and the consumers. And for example, we already have something available, let me say, which we use in smart cities in Bordeaux. You have heard about Christophe Collinet, for example. This is a typical use case. Smart cities are typical use cases, for example, where devices from different manufacturers talk among each other. So in the electricity area, we're the same, we see also smart meter manufacturers, and they are implementing for example, in Europe, implementing also something mostly on proprietary basis, and just parts of it, let me say, based on a standard, making it hard, having really this end-to-end ability to talk to each other. So in this respect, coming to India, to the Indian side, in India, what I learned, and also in other Asian companies, for example, there was already a policy decision and an indication towards, and a recommendation towards different standards or specifications. And so India is in these terms already ahead, because, for example, this common language between the different cities and between the different silos could be, for example, or is 1M to M. So the small startups, they could develop towards this common layer, this common language between the different layers, as nicely also outlined by Narang in his presentation before.
Okay.
So a little bit of help from policy would, let me say, put the pieces together.
Okay. Thank you, Andreas. That. Yeah, please.
I think Andreas is touching upon a very interesting point. Is we always talk about interoperability, technical interoperability, but there is also a problem with regulatory interoperability, if I may say, because we are trying here to sort of merge, if not merge, at least make work together the transport network, the energy network, and the communications network. And not only there are massive issues, and Andreas just said it, between different agents which used to operate separately and to make business separately. And now we say, okay, now you're going to have to work together because this is one, etc. It creates a lot of problem, because sometimes also the business models are not only different, they are conflictual. And on top of this, you put the regulatory interoperability that you need to take care of, because too many cooks ruin the broth. And this is often what happens.
Yeah. Sure. I'll come to you, Kishore. I want to just move to Arindam. Arindam, Andreas just mentioned, I think I heard him right, when he talked about tariff silos, right? What that triggers is the thought that the startup ecosystem needs some sense of security in terms of being able to earn something so that they can sustain themselves. And if cities are bargaining really hard because there are many people who are offering the technologies, it becomes very difficult for the startup ecosystem. I wanted to know, how does CDOT view this, and what is the kind of feedback you're getting from the startups in terms of being able to secure some revenue streams from the thousands of cities in the country?
Primarily CDOT, doesn't get into the business process, what the startup and the end customer, whosoever is the customer, actually asking for such a solution. But the pain point of the startups is that the initial funding that is required for them to create solutions. Second pain point is that the opportunities for the business should be open to them. Currently, the doors are all closed, right? If the RFPs and the tenders, they ask for experience of larger volumes, and I mean significant time. So how would the startup be able to fulfill that particular kind of criteria to be able to even quote for a particular tender? So the tenders mostly are articulated, first of all, without the reference of any particular standard to which these particular startups which we have mobilized to actually come forward and be a partner of CDOT in the standardization and standard-based solutions. So they should be able to quote and compete for these kind of solutions. Once they are allowed to compete, I see a lot of confidence in them that they will make their way for making the money themselves because they are smart guys. Secondly, now I missed that part of the question in the first go regarding what I expect for collaboration with the EU partner. India, I mean, though being very different geographies, have a lot of similarities that I have known with my association with our friends out there. A lot of problems which they face, they might seem very different, but they are not. At the core of it, the problems are similar. And if our startup community can provide solutions for those geographies and vice versa, there'll be a lot of exchanges, not only of technological innovations that go across these geographies, and also the learning curve will improve for them. And so far, I mean, the funding requirement that these startups have been asking about is the starting point. And I have not seen anybody asking for sustainability regarding that. So once it is rolled out, I believe the monetization methods can be worked out by themselves. And see, at the end of the day, this money-making process will be there for any kind of solution that is rolled out. If it is not viable for the customers, that this much of spending is not going to fetch them any dividend, so that thing will never take place in real life.
Thank you. Thank you. Kishore, you had a sort of a burning comment.
Yeah, on smart metering, because I've been part of this ecosystem last 30 years. So in India now, everybody thinks we are going great guns, but the ground reality is quite different. Interestingly, yes, government has a real pressure and focus on deploying 250 million smart meter, which is a very big number, brings in everybody like, honeybees and all that. But the fact is, there's still lack of standards in between the real. When we talk about smart meter, we do not have standard on the communication. We do have a data exchange protocol, which is DLMS standard. But then when we talk about which communication technology, like RF mesh or this thing, we still do not have it. And nobody has bothered even National Smart Grid Mission has not bothered about it. And as a result, what happened when they needed to go big order? What they said, they had to, fine tune their own narrative. Okay, smart meter guy needs to have interoperability with a couple of HES people. HES person needs to have interoperability with a couple of meter vendors and the upper MDM level. But I think we are moving to a different times altogether where utility architecture is going digital. And these HES and MDM, the head-end system and the meter data management platform that they're talking, they're old architecture, old IT technology, which are passé now. And with this, how will they really, the deployment that they do today will actually get seamlessly integrated into tomorrow's digital utilities? That is another thing. And the communication. Finally, when today for getting empaneled, they demonstrate some limited interoperability. Right. But when there's final tender, we do not know whose meter would be selected, whose HES would be selected, whose MDM. And then they'll have to struggle again to bring interoperability with all this thing. And I think we need, so standards do take a pivotal role. Right. And one of the things when contextualizing it to smart city, was the same thing. But why should I have a separate communication standard for metering? Why can't I have a common communication standard?
No, I understand. I think what you've just done is to actually give some strength to the argument that procurement systems are a good entry point. I think Arindam would also say that if procurements are taking place, in a sense, there's demand, then the ecosystem will respond to that demand and people will find ways to actually. So demand generation, in some sense, is what cities really need to do. Lohit, I want to just come to you. I'm harking back a few years, and I'm hoping that you do have some memory of that. Siemens participated in the city of Eluru in Andhra Pradesh. You might be aware of that.
Yes.
And that was through a Swiss challenge. Just taking the procurement argument forward, does Siemens see that there is possibly a future for those kinds of arrangements? I know Eluru went southwards, but that's because you guys were breaking new ground. But do you see Swiss challenges at all as being ways that Indian cities might procure?
I think situation has changed now. There are a lot of improvements we see, and definitely we expect better and better mode of engagements in bringing in solutions to the Indian cities, right? When we talk about innovation, definitely standards or the process will be kind of hindrance for innovation, right? And when we bring in standards, it's not so easy that we are talking about smart meters. So getting data from meters, it's not same as getting data from a pump, controlling a light, the temperature sensors. They are all different, right? And badly we need a standard, something which works like how our UPI stack is, right? It should offer us to monetize. There should be incentives, and it will encourage startups and even the larger organizations to bring in their innovations along with standards. And you mentioned about the security, privacy, and all of it. So without that incentive or the monetization model benefits, I think it's going to be difficult. But UPI is a good example. It's a very good example. So we have a lot of applications, platforms using it, but there are no issues of standardization, the way they exchange information, all of it. It is all seamless. So we need that kind of framework. Of course, they are being tried out. Web3, for example, it's a model which is open source coming up for making the city models, the data model, to bring in all this different variety of data and standardize the way of storing, and then how do you process and make use of it for further analysis and take actions on it, right? So this is the cycle. And then when it comes to standards, UPI is a classic example, and we all have to bring in the expertise from the European standards and of course what we are experiencing in India. So the thing is, if we don't take a step, I heard a conversation there over tea that a crime happening in one city is recorded in a camera, but when the same vehicle is moved to other city, there is no way to track, right? And it is gone. But think that if we are not recording that itself, and the incident is not recorded or the vehicle is not recorded in the other city, there is no way of thinking about exchanging this information. Today we are there, so we are recording that incident is there, but we are talking about how do we exchange this information or put it together, correlate and say that this vehicle has moved from this city to this city committing this crime, right? So we are there right at the point where we are defining that layer of interoperability. It's been standardized in manufacturing industry, for example, industry 4.0. There are protocols standardized for machine connectivity, bringing into HMIs and the dashboards, the web layer, real-time monitoring. All these aspects are covered very well there. So when it comes to smart cities, there are different type of data use cases being addressed, and it's also about people acceptance and the skillful workers. So that's an important aspect. So implementation, once the installation is done, it's all fine, all live. But then what happens after that? Who will manage that? If a sensor is not working, if a meter is failed, how do we troubleshoot that? Where is the workforce for that? So the workforce is not trained enough. We need to bring in that skill also in the institutions where we are training the workforce. So that those are critical part which are essential.
Thanks,
I would say.
Thanks for bringing in that element of the trained manpower or trained human resource we need to actually also work in these ecosystems, because we tend to forget that. And the standardization of skill sets, which is required, and the skilling programs need to address. is an important missing piece, because we need to look at life cycle operations of these networks. And as I mentioned in my remarks in the last session, growth. Unless we've got a sort of availability of captive skills, we're not going to be able to grow as per standards as well. So we're coming to the last few minutes of our session. We have another 5 minutes. Yeah. Can I react? Oh, sure, please do.
I'm so sorry, reacting, perhaps. But I see it's unfortunate, because the problem statement that you gave, really, that is already solved by the standard we have been talking about in the previous session and all year long. The 1M2M is a national standard, for that matter, right now in India. 1M2M has been pushed in BIS by MOHUA since, as we mentioned there, smart cities, smart cities are state subjects. It is not forced upon them. It is basically they are supposed to adopt it. Now RFPs are also mentioning 1M2M. The problem statement that you gave, that a camera, a person, a particular vehicle detected involved in a particular crime and it goes to another city, it goes undetected. These can all be solved if they follow a simple regimen of following that standard at that particular layer. Now, this standard is not, enforcing itself on the business use cases. It's just a middle layer standard. So all innovations, the first thing, the basic resistance is about that. The basic resistance, as Kishore you mentioned, that everybody thinks that a standard will impede innovation. Contrastingly, the open standards, horizontal standards actually promote innovations. It doesn't enter into a business use case space, but it enables you. All that you have been doing. So what the standard does, you are doing all ground up coding, everything you are putting, doing everything that perhaps the standard is offering, but the standard is offering as a standardized interface, as a service function. So the way clouds have emerged today, the way Android has emerged, it gives you what? It gives you all that platform on which youngsters are developing applications which you are using on your smartphones. So this particular standard is giving that on a platter for you. It's a toolkit. Create applications that you want to use, create your own innovations in the business space, roll it out faster, because the time to deliver will be much shorter if you follow that standard. Unfortunately, companies like Siemens, I'm saying like Siemens, not Siemens alone. Companies like Siemens are actually being a big resistance to this, because they are sitting on big money. They are already doing proprietary implementation solutions, which they are afraid, I'm sorry to say, they are afraid that once it opens up with standardization, the small players will compete with us and they might offer the solution at a much lower rate than we are offering. So the moolah that goes into Siemens' large kitty might get distributed across so many startups, right? So
no, I think
So
that's fantastic. We've got to that point in the session where we are provoking each other. No, absolutely, of course. And we've also been given another 10-15 minutes to continue this conversation. I think Andreas wants, before you do that, because Andreas just raised his hand. Andreas, go ahead. You want to have some intervention?
Thank you for getting the floor. So I was also triggered by Lohit, whose comment, about the missing standard, and also mentioning or referring to Industry 4.0. Maybe just giving a bit of history on for example, 1M2M, and I can also fully support Arendam, what he said before. So 1M2M started already in 2012. So at this point in time, Industry 4.0 didn't even know about the problems they have in the future. So we have really quite a long history about thinking about problems and solve them, so it's quite an advanced standard. And just to explain it a bit in, let me say, practical terms, what you can think of 1M2M is really something like the operating system you have on your smartphone. So, and this is actually decoupling, let me say, exactly, and also involving, let me say, the ecosystem we all want to have startups, for example, developing something around a standard. So the application is coming from for example, a startup, which is based on 1M2M. And what you said with the sensors, switching on a light in a city, you know, is the same as switching on a light, for example, in a house or in an industry plant. So it's just a matter of abstraction. And this abstraction is done exactly by 1M2M. So it's offering some interfaces towards the sensors and offering interfaces towards the cloud. So it's really a very versatile standard. And India did a good decision to promote this in India, for example. And I think this is also necessary in other areas, because as we see, some big companies sometimes don't want standards, or even don't know about those standards. And it's important that the policymakers are pretty, let me say, giving guidance on this. Thank you.
Okay. Thanks, Andreas. Lohit,
Yep.
you want to respond?
Yeah. I'm not going to comment on the financial positions of Siemens and what they do.
I guess it needs
because
no,
I'm not
it
the
needs no
person,
comment.
right?
It speaks for itself.
So keeping that part aside, you might be experiencing the sales force, which is coming and responding to RFPs and dealing with this ecosystem to implement the projects and things like that. But I am representing a community which deals with innovation, and I personally have engaged with startups to bring in their solutions and then implementing in different part of the world, right? Specifically in smart cities. I can give their names, but it is reality. The fact is, it takes time to open up, because it is not possible to survive for long resisting such kind of innovations, right? It is impossible. So we tried creating innovation hub within Siemens organization itself as a drive. Next 47 was the organization helping us to create a company within Siemens and encourage innovations. But then it's not so fruitful, I would say, and we are looking outside partnerships and adopting this innovation from them as well, right? When it comes to scale, as you were quoting that cities are looking for references, where have you implemented this, right? What is the scale of the project? When this kind of question comes in, it's a challenge for startups, right? So being the taking the first step in this domain.
So finally. Welcome. Sorry.
So yeah, taking first step in this business for startups, bringing that kind of references will be challenging. So there is a need of collaboration between such experience and innovation from the entire community is a need, right? And there is no resistance, at least I would say, from the innovation community point of view, from Siemens. So I can vouch for it.
Okay.
That's my answer.
Thanks, Lloyd. We have another 10 minutes, right?
I think, can I respond?
Just 1 second.
Yeah.
We've just been joined by Wim de Kessel, who I think got delayed in the previous session. Some other session. Unfortunately, for us.
So before we go to just 1 minute.
Sure. Yeah.
So I think what they were talking about, that interoperability and all that. I think in smart city standard, there are two things are very important from technological point of view as well as from standardization. Semantic interoperability and system level standard. When we talk about semantic interoperability, most of the ecosystems have got intra-domain semantic interoperability well done, dusted, and achieved. But in city needs inter-domain semantic interoperability.
Sure, that's too theoretical for me. I can't.
So semantic is meaning. The meaning of what you're communicating, the information, the meaning.
What you're saying is there's complexity.
In that, and that needs to be done, but not only at the cloud level, at the IT level, but right from device level, which our unified digital infrastructure standard have done it. But we need more system standard than siloed product oriented standard.
Okay, thank you. That helps a lot, and perhaps that even sets up what I'm going to request Wim to share with us. Wim, you're president of standards at Legrand, and in some sense, if I can use a pun, you know about switching between systems. But in that sense, you're also the gatekeeper of standards. I mean, a switching technology company knows exactly how standards operate in reality. Share with us a quick thought. I'm sorry, I'm not going to summarize what's been already said, but we started with reflections just like this. Share with us some thoughts that you have about how standards are operating currently in the ecosystem, perhaps in the geography where you work, and how the India-EU partnerships might yield some useful initiatives with regard to promoting standards.
Well, yeah, for me, everything starts with the regulation. Sorry to go a bit further off.
Margot talked about regulation. So
Yeah.
please do.
It all starts with regulations, and the regulations are referring to standards. So even before the regulations, you need to have the policy. Where do you, as a community, want to go? What is the objective? What's the need of the community? And really, the policy, it's the basis of everything. That's the direction. Then you need to decline this into regulations. And I like to see the way regulations are made in Europe. And this is with very high level, clear objectives, but please don't go into the details because it's impossible to cover everything. Details are in the standards. But if the regulations are referring to standards, there is where you put the how and the what and the limits. That is essential. And there is also such that, well, the policies that's high level by the politics, the regulator need to translate it into the regulations, and the standards are right in the standards. And then finally, using this complete ecosystem to ensure that the products you put on the table, the products you put in the market are compliant. And what is extremely important is that we are, especially around topics like all the smart things, that we are not diverging too much country by country. Because the one thing which is very national is the internet, but that is now a thing which goes from one end to the other over the whole globe. So the cybersecurity is as important in India as in Europe or Latin America or in Australia. So it's very important that we also have there a kind of a harmonization in terms of legislation also, because the objectives finally should be the same, only we don't have that. That's the main objective, it's the main benefit of Europe, that for the 27 countries, plus the EFTA countries, of course, we have one regulation, and that is so great. One regulation referring to one standard, having access to that complete market. If we now could put this also on the international level, which we do with the standards, of course, that's a first step. But I do think that the basic for that, being the regulations, should also be harmonized as much as possible on the global level, especially for those services which are global.
Okay, thanks. Thanks, Wim. That gives us a good springing board for I think my last question, in which I'd like to engage all of you. Before you came in, Wim, we talked about also the tendency of big players in the market to corner the market, so to speak. And this is an old economics problem. But having said that, now standards are also going to allow for the proliferation of many innovators and startups and such like. And there is a whole ecosystem that Orindam, for instance, is involved in actually supporting. I want to just come to one key point. I mean, we are talking at a time when a lot of countries are in Dubai at the COP28, and they're talking about unified climate action. And this report that's been produced is also basically premised on the need for smart cities and smart technologies, standardization, all of that feeding into a larger sort of societal need, which is decarbonization. Now, there is an argument in decarbonization which also says that there is a need for people to also look at off-grid infrastructure, right? While we talk about standardization as a way to bring larger and larger systems together and integrate them, there is resilience in off-grid as well, and decentralization in that way. So isolation is not necessarily a bad thing if you're in the mountains somewhere or if you're in the desert. Trying to connect to the whole thing, to the whole network doesn't make that much sense, except in telecom, of course. But having said that, what I want to understand from each one of you really is that where do you place your bets? Are we headed towards more and more integration at national levels like in India? Are we headed towards a balance between decentralization and centralization? What, in your estimation, is going to work better with regard to technology rollouts, with regard to markets, with regard to also the ability to be resilient in the face of shocks that are coming from climate? And again, I'll turn to Andreas to set the ball rolling on that question. Andreas?
Thank you for giving me the word. I like the clear structure from Wim de Kessel. I think this is a really good way. Sometimes the way is left out for, let me say, the policy or the regulation making or recommending the right standards, because not all the standards need to be written on the first time. On your question on distribution or centralization, I think we will see a decentralized or more and more decentralized, let me say, world, especially in terms of energy and also in terms of resilience. So one of the, let me say, great decentralized, let me say, innovations in the past has been the internet. You know, we have seen it was developed also for a certain reason, and it's quite resilient. I think there is some resistance in the market for, especially in the energy market, you know, to go towards this, because it's much easier to steer something as we have it now, with big power plants, for example. But with the renewables, we are going in sustainability. We probably go more and more into decentralized power plants. And as I flew in, for example, here to Japan, I saw a lot of power plants, PV power plants around. So you can see this also in other states. I flew over on the standardization trips. So I think this is the way we go. However, we need to build up those infrastructures that enable the communication between all those distributed plants on the consumer side and also on the producer side to make this happen. But it needs a behavior change. I heard the sentence before in one of the presentation. Thank you.
Thanks, Andreas. I'm glad that you've said behavior change for the third time. That's the, you know, it does need to be, it bears emphasis and repetition as well. What's your take on this, Orindan?
Honestly speaking, I really don't understand this, this isolated entity. It's a connected world now we are moving towards. We are entering into a world of meta, where, physically and abstract way we are connected. So once you have fragmented systems, those fragmented systems put together consume more energy than when you actually, harmonize it, collect it, and use. The concept of cloud actually has given a kind of feeling to everybody that the energy consumed in siloed data centers and siloed infrastructure was far more inefficient from an energy point of view as compared to a centralized cloud-based infrastructure. In IoT world also, the use case and the problem statement that we talked about talks about connected ecosystem. So I'm not very sure whether this kind of fragmented, isolated entities would end up in saving and creating a sustainable, kind of environmental ecosystem. So we have to treat carefully. We have to see to it that which is of benefit for us.
Okay, just to give some background to this, for instance, I'm an architect, so I keep track of what's going on in that world as well. And there are standalone communities. For instance, near San Diego, there's a whole community that's been built, which is completely net zero, but standalone. It doesn't use its energy to connect as well, because mobile telephony is available. So it doesn't have wires connected elsewhere, right? It generates its own energy and uses it right there locally. Thank you. So I guess that's the kind of direction of movement also that's happening, while there's also the unification of larger systems. And that clearly comes back to what Wim said about regulations and policy. What is it that we want to achieve? Some years ago, we had the entire northern grid fall, because of some technical failure. That's the kind of scenario in which the need to isolate different parts of the grid was recognized, and technically a solution was found. Indeed. So it's always a tug of war in some sense between the larger system and the components of that system needing their own independence. It's a bit like democracy.
Edge computing is the way to
Sure. So what I want to understand is where do you see this going from the perspective of resilience? Margot, how has the European Union thought through this particular problem? I'm sure it's not unfamiliar to you.
Thank you. I don't know if you are all familiar with the CyberSyn project, which was in the 70s in Chile. There was a scientist from the then telematics scientist from the Silicon Valley who had convinced President Allende that it would be nice if he could control from the presidential palace all the economic activity of the country. Transportation, factory production, movement of people, etc. And they really had installed a whole big centralized system, which was quite interesting. Of course, the CIA had different plans for President Allende than the ones he was thinking of, so we never saw the actual fruition of this project. But this was the epitome of centralization. I'm not, and it's a very interesting story actually. I encourage you to read more about this. It's extremely interesting. I'm not sure this is where we're moving, and I'm not sure I know how to answer your question. What I know is I've been standardization long enough to hear about intelligence at the core, intelligence at the edge, intelligence this, intelligence that. I don't know how to answer your question basically, so I tried this excursus on Project CyberSyn just to give an example.
No, thank you. I think the Chile example is really an interesting sort of prompt. Wim, any thoughts you'd like to offer?
Yeah, I don't think it's need to be a target. It needs to be a means, centralized or not centralized. It's the means, and the means means that you want to solve a problem. And if you have disaster recovery, then isolation is very interesting. But if you want to have redundancy, then you should not be isolating. On the contrary, then you need to integrate. So I think it definitely needs to be something which is a combination where you can isolate when you need and combine if you need. And in terms of, then you also have the specific applications. As you said, high in the mountains, somewhere deep in the woods or in the jungle, well, there is nothing. The only thing what you can do nowadays very easily is photovoltaics on batteries, and you're off. Putting a grid in place is extremely expensive. By doing so the standalone setup, you can really give a lot of advantages and opportunities to local communities which they don't have because the grid is not there. So I would say, depending the issue you want to solve, make sure that you make the right decision. But being able to make compartments where you have isolation possible is definitely interesting in certain ways.
Thanks. So we certainly need not an individual like the president of Chile, but certainly some kind of organizations or networks that have an overview of all of this, because who decides about every component? And I think in that regard, it would be interesting for us to also address, and I sort of heard the idea of agility in what you said, and a good friend Martin started this open agile smart cities out of Aarhus University, and I find that very compelling as an idea. But from the system design perspective itself, what is this issue of agility, and how does it even factor into design? Can I quickly ask Kishore, but very quickly, very short.
I'll give you first of all, I think India is got the largest grid, and one nation, one grid, one frequency. Now, but in 2012, we had a major cascading effect of, because one plant shut down and they were tripping all across north and maybe some part of central India. From there, we learned the islanding, what we were talking about. Islanding and isolation, they are two different things. Okay. Islanding capability has to be there even in the larger grids and networks. And same, we talk in network, communication network, we call it that, demilitarized zones and all those kind, having some kind of islanding impact there. Okay. So the thing is, we are going to have all of the central grids and central station are going to be there, but we are always going to need smaller independent solutions of our generation plants. We are talking smaller nuclear plants also. Why? Because it may distributed this thing, energy also generation and consumption adds to a lot of energy efficiency at the transmission and distribution scale. Right. But I think we are going to have both of them. And as I think Wim also rightly said, it's where do we need what? Okay. If it's isolated, you better have it as isolated thing.
Fantastic. So you're also resonating with what Wim said. Essentially, at the end of the day, somebody's got to do that regulation and write that policy.
But yes, we need to have an overall this thing. Right. Not simply only centralized or only decentralized, nothing like that.
And what, if I can move to Lohit, Lohit, as a company, Siemens, how do you look at regulators and institutions that actually implement policies in the Indian context? How are you viewing this?
Yeah, I think I second Wim and of course Kishore. So it's the hybrid approach we should take. And when it comes to grid, right, isolation makes sense, and we have instances, examples, how it helped, and how centralization of, let's say, data management. So that's a different use case altogether. So we need mix of this. So when we talk about data, managing at central place and executing the use cases at edge, both matters. So depending on the problem what we are solving, and of course, hybrid is the answer finally, but use case to use case, we have to take a call during the implementation or even the planning phase. That's my answer. Yeah.
Let me come to Arindam. Arindam, this question about the need for the institution or organization that has the best overview, right? You're part of the government of India. CDOT has a very important role to play in that sense. Do you view yourself as having line of sight on every single part of the ecosystem that you're commanding, or do you see dark spots which you're not able to penetrate? And how do you handle that? Do you network with other parts of the government of India? Do you network with the private or other network?
We do, because we kind of act as a bridge between the government who's actually governing. We're an R&D wing of Government of India. We were more corporate in our style of functioning rather than being government. So we function with our partners and even other ecosystem players who are from the private sector. We also interact with various government agencies because now we are in such a technology area which touches upon every part of, whether you call it industry ecosystem or common persons. So we are cutting across all. So while we are touching all aspects of it, I wouldn't say that we have an eye on everything. We cannot pinpoint every problem because we do not have that domain knowledge of every sector. So there we need those particular specialists or those departments who have got an eye on that. But collaborating with them gives us a kind of feeling that this might require a deeper insight into something, and we get that from them. So as I said, it is a networked world. So this also is a networked world. Nobody can create a policy sitting at a very, kind of pinnacle position and deciding everything. So it has to be a collaborative effort for the regulators also and for this policymakers also. So that is what my take is.
Fantastic. I think we can kind of rest at that point, which is a good networked policymaker, regulator that can actually have a commanding view of the whole ecosystem that needs to be integrated through standards. Yeah, and the standards are operating in many different ways, which we've all, I think, touched upon through the session. So I think with that, we'll take a few questions if there are any at all. Yes, please. And to whom are you addressing the question?
So I got stuck at when Kishorji talked about resistance to standards, and I haven't moved from there since then. So what I want to ask is that resistance to standards also means, issues in capacity building, right? And issues in capacity building means issues in implementation. So, it touches the entire circle. And I'm sure this is not the challenge only in India, but it must have been, and it still is a challenge in Europe as well. I want to ask, where are we in Europe and in India on this issue? And from your experience, how much time do we need to mature how much time do we need to reach the level of maturity? And I also understand that both Sensenelec and Etsy have started programs on, integrating standardization related issues on standards. They have, integrated it in colleges, in curriculum and all. And has it helped in any manner?
So I'll give you very quickly India scenario. Yeah. I know. I think it's a very
Those
valid.
are two questions, so you could answer.
I'll answer from India side. So in India side, I think as I mentioned, the business case has not been properly made to the different classes of stakeholder, because for different classes of stakeholder, different kind of business case has to be presented. So but BIS has already started this journey. I'm very happy to see that. Note that. Okay, they have started evangelizing it, and they have even started interacting with the institutions, started having standards there in colleges and all that. But I think it will take quite some time. But the real stakeholder is industry and innovators, not the institutions alone. But this phenomena is global also. When we sit in IEC, ISO, we are talking developing standard, but stakeholders do. Why is this standard on this topic? Why this? We get a lot of skepticism because people come with different perception, expectations in the global platforms. I'll stop at that.
I guess not everybody has to express an opinion on why standards, right? I mean, they could just use that. Wim, any thoughts on those two questions, or either of those two questions?
Well, it all depends on stakeholders, and finally, who's putting a lot of effort into this is the one who gets the benefit out of it. I mean, we are begging for consumers to join standardization, but they never do. We are asking for the SMEs to join standardization, but they don't do, because they say they think they're too small. No, get organized and make sure you're there. I'm a bit blunt coming from a multinational, but sorry, that's life. And it has to be also known that small companies in the past, in the 70s and the 80s, even before that, were present in standardization because they thought it was important. And it is important. I mean, my company has leading roles in IEC, in Senelec, and also on the national basis, because it is one of the fundaments of product development. Some of the fundamentals to ensure that new products can come on the market in a safe way. And not working on standards means, in fact, that you are not opening the markets for new applications and new solutions. So it is essential, but people need to understand. And I think, therefore, education is essential, but you need education on a level of the academics. So in the curricula for lawyers, for marketeers, for engineers, for financial people, everywhere we need the knowledge of standardization to be put in. But that's one thing. Secondly, what is also essential is education of CEOs of companies, because those are the guys with the money in the pocket. Those guys need to know what are the benefits and what is the return on investment in the long run. But then you should be a CEO with a vision, and not a CEO being a salesman, because that guy is thinking about 5 days ahead. No, you need about 5 years ahead, 10 years ahead. That is standardization, long-term, make sure that you know where you want to go, and make sure that you know how the whole market is going to evolve, and having the interconnection with the competition, with the regulators. I mean, that is extremely important. Therefore, also policy on a company level, but also on a country level, even on a regional level, is so important that we know where we need to go, where we need to go.
Thank you. Thank you. Yes, please.
Two examples of standards. One is today's socket, electrical socket. So every country has got different mechanisms, but within a country, had it not been standardized, right, where would we be? Second example is our vehicles. Had we left it open for where the steering would be in a vehicle, would there be any policy how the roads would be constructed? Right. So certain standards require a regulatory backing and mandating. Standards primarily are voluntary in nature. So once it comes to a larger good for the country, there are certain standards have to be enforced, mandated. Here, the agencies and the government, or rather I should say the regulators and the policymakers, have to see which of these standards are for larger benefit for the masses. In that sense, they will have to mandate certain standards. A thought process has to begin, which has not started as yet.
Thank you, Arindam. So, you know, standards as an economic imperative. There's the big economic case for this, and I think the fact that the report does talk, but I would say you need to expand the European Union's move towards a common market. That building of that market is really crucial, and we need to build understanding across the ecosystem about how important this is, right? I'm going to take a pause just to quickly check, are there any burning questions, issues, statements that any of the panelists want to make? Since there are no other questions, if you'd like to address any points, Wim, please.
Standardization, extremely important. Don't standardize everything.
Right.
Regulations are very important. Don't regulate everything.
Yeah.
I must say that imposing standards by the letter is dangerous because it kills innovation. You need to leave the opportunity for innovative people, innovative organizations to put new things in the market for which there is no standard, there is no regulation. So keep an open mind, make sure that we push for innovation because it's to the benefit of society.
Thank you. That's a very good way to close. Democracy affirming, freedom affirming, life affirming statement. Let's not be totalitarian about the system we create. Fantastic. So we'll stop there. Thank you very much to all the panelists. Thanks, Wim, for joining us, albeit late, but you gave us some really wonderful points to close our discussion on. Indeed. Oh, is there another? Andrea. Oh, Andreas, I'm so sorry. I forgot to glance at the screen. Andreas, do you want to say something, please?
There was a nice ending word, you know. My put on my term on top, or my 2 cents on top of this is we should also look for the right standards, you know, from the right area, because what I have seen now was in the discussion, we have mentioned IEC standards, we have mentioned also telecommunication standards, and sometimes there is a world in between. And also we can see this on the European side, you know. So there is this standardization request, you know, coming from EU for something which is already there and which is taken over by Senelec, for example, on IEC level. So sometimes we should cleverly look at those standards of being available and before we start something new and reinventing the wheel.
Okay, great, Andreas. You've given us one more closing line. Let's not reinvent the wheel. If something exists, let's adapt or accept. Yeah, fantastic. Thank you very much, and thank you, Andrea, as well, for being patient with us online. We'll close now and, with some mementos. Please. I've already got one. Oh, I need to.
To Orindam. Yes. And
Thank you. Thank you. Pleasure.
I think Margot has already got, so, and so does Wim, but to Lohit. Thank you, Lohit.
Okay.
To Mr. Kishore Narang. You. So we can have 5 more trees in your name. You deserve it.
More than happy to have everyone.
Yeah, and I think
Let's go. Everybody's got.
I had one this morning, so I'm not going to carry it.
Because then carry the names. So they don't. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Thank you.
thank you so much. So
Thank
is
you.
this for you?
No, I've already got one.
Okay. All right. Thank you so much. And
Standardization, right?
yes. We have almost finished on time, but the other 2 panels are still going on. But that gives us time for some more tea and coffee, and we can go back to the main hall where the valedictory session will take place. And I think we'll be wrapping it up pretty soon. So thank you so much.
Group photograph.
Yeah.
Group photo. Ma'am, please go back.
Thank you so
Thank
much.
you.
Thank you very much.